All right, welcome to today's training. Last week we looked at lists, we looked at indexing in lists, and we also looked at slicing. We looked at how to index a list using the positive indexing, and also how to index using the negative indexing. All right, so today we're going to look at how to modify a list. We're also going to look at nested lists. And if time permits, we would start conditionals in Python using if, else, and else if in Python. All right, so so modifying a list basically means you adding an element to a list. Of course, like we all know the meaning of modification. So it basically means like either adding or removing, right? So basically that's what we are going to look at right away. All right, so what does so we have like different methods and functions that we can use to modify a list, right? So we're going to looking at the methods to modify a list, right? We have the append method, we have the insert method, we have the index, we have the extend method. So and why do we have all these methods, and how can we use it in Python, right? And mind you, each of these methods are actually very important because we're going to be using this to solve real life problems. Please let's pay attention. Okay, so looking at list methods, right? So how can we delete a list, right, or an element of a list, right? We talked about what is a list the last time, right? So I'm just going to try and pick up this. So I typed the code here before now so that we don't spend so much time trying to type the code. Okay, so this, I guess everyone understand what this is. This is basically a variable being initialized with lists with different elements, right? We have string elements in here, and then this is the output of our list, right? So if we want to delete an element in a list, right? So we have the list here, right? You understand what this is, right? So if we say name -1, I would assume everyone understand what that is. That's like indexing, right? So we are taking the last element. Remember, this is negative indexing, so we can't start from 0, start from 1 to the behind, right? So -1 is taking the reference from behind, right, which is negative indexing, right? So if we want to delete this particular element from our list, right, what we have to do is use the delete keyword and then pass in the list and also what the index of the element we want to remove. Okay, so if we do something like this, for example, if I run this cell, you can see that, and then if I run this, for example, I'm just going to rerun this. You can see now that I've taken out Tommy, right? Which was the last index in my list before now. Okay, so one thing you should be mindful of is that if you do not put index here, it is going to delete the entire list, right? So you have to be mindful of that. Okay, so this is basically like the same thing. So if I do delete name without putting an index, right, without saying, oh, show me an index, if I run this cell trying to get the list I have before now, right, it's going to show me a name error because it's saying I can't find that variable or the list we are trying to call, right? So basically it's showing like an error, right, because I've deleted entirely that list from my work environment. Okay, so you should be mindful of the indexing when you're using the delete keyword. Okay, so I'm just going to take this again. I'm just going to copy this so we can use, because I've deleted it just now. Okay, so like you can see, this will return an error. So we have seen syntax error, we've seen name error, I think we've seen type error too. Okay, so and one thing I normally I would advise is read your error message, right? Even as professional programmers, people still have errors, right, in their code. So even reading your errors and understanding it's actually like one part of problem solving. Okay, so if we have delete 3, right, this 3 means index, right, not elements, right? So we have to count 0, 1, 2, 3. So that means I'm taking Kenny out of this, right? And then this would give us this new list. Okay, so we're going to look at other list methods to modify our list. So for example, I'm going to run this list called cars, right? This is just the list comprising a different brand of cars, right? And then we have this here. So this append method, what append method does is that it adds, so I'm going to put it this way so we don't get confused, right? Append method adds just one element at a time, right? So before we go to list method, let's check nested. Let's check nested list, so you would be able to understand perfectly append, right? So let's go and do nested list, right? So what exactly is nested list, right? If you hear something called nested, it means something inside of another, right? So for example, here I have, let's say I have name, right? So if I just change this to details, and then I have something like this. So, oh no, okay. So I'm going to run this, for example. So if I have something like this, for example, just a moment, I'm going to type here, right? I have, let's say I want to get the name and the age of, people in this training, right? So I can have maybe Kenny, right? And I can say maybe comma, maybe let's imagine Kenny it's about 28 or 27 years old, right? So this is like one value, right? I also want to have something like, let's say Bolu, and let's say Bolu is about 25, for example, right? I want to have all these details in one list, right? So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to create a nested list, okay? So to create a nested list, like we all know, like the meaning of nested means something inside of another, right? So we are putting a list inside of another list, right? So if we have like a list, so let's imagine this is our big list, right? This here and this is like our bigger umbrella, right? And then we have individual lists. So I can separate this with a comma, right? So this is one element in this big list. This is another element in this big list, right? So if I say return details to me, I'm just going to remove this, or we can comment it out. And how you do comment in Python is adding this hash symbol, right? That's how you comment it out. So comment basically means that our Jupyter, our Google Colab will not mind this thing, right? So it will not run this cell, this particular thing we typed in here. So it's only going to, type this, run this, right? So that's how you do commenting in Python. It's really not a big deal. Okay, so if I run this now, so you can see, yeah, unlike the list I have before now. So I'm just going to grab this so we can see and compare both. Okay, so we have this, and then we have this, for example. Okay, so this is like a list here, right? But this here is a nested list. And why is it a nested list? Because we have a list inside of another list, right? So the way we did this here, so how are we now going to do indexing and slicing for this kind of list, right? So you can see like it's like just like one step ahead, right? So here, if we want to get dollar $, we say name and 0, right? Because dollar $, is of index 0, right? If we want to get Tony, we say index, 0, 1, 2, right? So this is index 2, right? So if we want to get 27, for example, how are we going to do that, right? Do not forget, this is a list inside of another list, right? And how you index or how you slice still remains the same, okay? So how then do you now go from this single level to like a multiple level list, right? So how do you do that? So remember, this is a list, yeah, inside this bigger list, right? This is like the bigger list, right? So this here would be of this here. Let me highlight this. This here will be like of the index 0 in this particular list. When you have a nested list, this will be like index 0 because it's a list inside of another list. This here will be what? Index 1. So let's try that out. Let's say details, and let's say 0, for example. If we run this cell, you see what we have, right? Compared to if we do name 0 here, we are going to have just the $, here, right? But if we do detail 0 here, we're going to have the first element inside of that nested list, whether it's a list or not, right? So, and that's why this is returning this to us, right? So let's imagine that this here, let's assign a different variable to it, so that we don't get confused. Oh my, what's happened? Okay, so just a moment. So we don't get confused. So, okay, I'm just going to okay, so we don't get confused. I'm just going to type that again. Okay, yeah, we are here. Okay, so just a moment, please. I don't know why I can't find that again. Okay, so I'm just going to type it from my head and we'll move from there. So don't waste our time. Yeah, so we have, for example, cars, and I'm going to do this. Okay, so let's say we have details like we had there. This is one of the reasons I don't use Google Colab. Okay, so we have something like this, Kenny, and then we have 27 like we had before. So I'm just going to come here and then do this. And then something like this. So I think we had Bolu, right? And then we had that's 25. Okay, so and then we have this, right? So this was what we had before, right? So okay. So if we do details 0, just like we had before the glitch, and then we want to have, okay, yeah. So we take a step after the other so we don't get confused. Just to confirm, can everyone hear me? Just confirm that. Can you all hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, I can.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so looking at this now, so looking at this, for example, we have, so we can do something like this. So if we have this saved as a variable. For example, if we have A is equal to this, right? And then I want to see what A is, right? So, you know, like I said, this should be print A normally, okay? So this is what we have, right? So I'm just going to put this so we don't get confused. Okay, so this is what we have, right? So from here, right, we can see we've so what we are trying to do here is we're trying to get this 27, right? If it was normal indexing for this card, for example, if you want to get Benz, right, you know it's going to be car 0, right? But for this, we can't do detail 0, and we can't get 27 directly like that, right? So we have to do it like a step after the other, right? But then when you're, you know, quite conversant with this, you're going to, you know, you'll be able to do it once at once. Okay, so this is A now. So if I say, so it means that A is equal to what? Kenny 27, right? So if I do something like this, A 0 again, right? This should return Kenny, right? Because this is a list, right? The result of what we had from, you know, detail 0. And then we are looking for the 0 index element, which is what Kenny. So if this is 1, this will definitely return 27, right? So if we want to go from here to here directly to getting 27 directly, we can just do something like this. So we can just do something like this. You can do details 0, 0, right? So, oh, sorry, to get 27, that will be detail 0, 1, okay? So let me explain what this is doing, right? So if you see something like this, right, basically what this is saying is that we most likely have like a nested list, right? So it means take the first element or first index, right? First index of, you know, what we have in our bigger list, and then after that, take like the second index, right, of second element, first index of the second list. I don't know if that's confusing. Let me go again. So for example, if we want to get 27 here, this list here, Kenny, 27 is at 0 index for the first element in the details list. Does that make sense? Then Bolu 25 is what? The first index, but the second element in the details list, right? So does that make sense? Let me know if we all understand that. And please, if you have any questions,
Yeah.
just drop it in the chat and I would clarify immediately. Okay, please, I need you to understand this because when you start something like a for loop, you want to probably get something like this using, you know, a loop. You need to understand what I'm talking about right now because it's very crucial. Okay, so talking about nested list, so it's also the same thing if you want to do like slicing, right? So imagine we have, let's say, for example, imagine we have, so let's do this. Right, so imagine I have something like, let's say, employee details, right? So let's imagine this detail is your name, your age, your hobby. So let's say skipping, let's say the car you ride or drive. Let's say I'm a big fan of bands. Let's say, for example, Bolu loves football, looks like an Arsenal fan. Let's see, let's imagine Bolu loves BMW. For example, right? I just want to show us slicing using nested index, right? It's basically the same thing, right? So if I want to get from 27 to skipping, right? That if that's what I want to get, right? You have to look at it from this point, right? So for me to get that, first off, right? How we did slicing in the past is we take a particular index and then stop at a particular index and then get that element within that list, right? So if we're going to, do that, right, it means that to get this, first off, we need to take out the lists in that nested list, first off. And then from there, we can do our slicing, right? So if I'm going to get 20 to skipping, it means I should do something like employee details 0 first off, right? And this, what am I missing? Employee underscore details. So, okay, I guess I've not run this. Okay, name error. Okay, cool. All right, so it means we have to get like a list first off before we get like we do like a slicing, right? So if we want to slice now, I guess somebody can help with that. You can just easily do something like this, right? So if we want to get 27 to skipping, right? So this is 0, 1. So we're starting at index 1, right? And we're going to index 2. But remember, slicing, you can't stop at index 2. You have to add 1, which is 3, right? So if we do something like, so that means this here, as we can see here, is this list, right? So if we want to do slicing, it means that we can now say, okay, what we have here, then we slice that particular list, right? So I can do something like this. So 27 to skipping, right? 0, 1. So I can say 1 to what? Not 2, right? Definitely 3. Okay, so if I do 3, right, I would get 27 and skipping. Is that confusing? Do we understand what I just did?
So we don't put the 1 at the front again.
Yeah.
Who asked about putting 1 at the front?
I.
Okay,
After
no.
the 3.
Oh, like I said, that's like a default value. So if we put 1,
okay,
1 is the default value. Whether you put it or not, it's going to be 1. So you can see, right? So if you don't put 1, it's automatically takes it at 1, right? So yeah. Okay. So do we all understand nested lists? And
yes.
It's actually very crucial because I can give you like a list here, and I would say using a loop just gets me the name and the card they write, right? How are you going to do that, right? So when we get to for loop and loops in general, we're going to see how to go about that, okay? So that's nested list. And why I went to nested list is so that we can understand append better, right? So append basically takes in an element and adds one element at a time. Okay, so I'm going to show you this. So I'm just going to bring cars here so we can see. Oh, I did cut it. Okay. So if we have, this is cars, right? So we don't have issues with it. So if I append Ferrari, for example, right? If I append Ferrari, for example, right? So you are going to see the result. So how you do use append method is you say the list you have dot append, which is a method, and then you pass in the element you want to add to the list. So append basically adds the element to the end of your list, okay? So it basically just adds that element to the end, right? It doesn't add it to the start, right? So if you are asked in an interview question, you'd know why you need to use append and not some other method, okay? So you can see what we have here, right? So you can see append Toyota, it also appends Toyota to the last. So what if we pass 2 elements to to our list? What happens, right? Let's see, that will return, an error for us, right? So you can see exactly. So that's why you need to understand error. You need to read your error messages and understand it, right? So you can see here it's saying append takes exactly one argument, but 2 was given, and that's why I'm showing an error, right? So we can easily fix that. Now, don't forget, so when I say append takes one element, right? I'm not explicitly saying that you can only pass in one value, right? So technically, yes, you can only pass in one value. But then if we have this as a list, right? Before now, we had it like as individual elements, right? Now we're having it as a list. So if we run this, you can see what has happened here, right? We now have Ferrari and Toyota as a list inside the main list, right? So it's not adding Ferrari and Toyota as individual elements, it's adding them together as a list. And then you can see that what happens is whenever you pass in more than one element as a list in an append method, you automatically get a nested list. Does that make sense? So I'm going to go over it again. So before now, like I said, just so that we don't get confused, whenever you use append, it basically takes in one argument, as we've seen, right? So I passed in Ferrari, we had Ferrari here, and it appends, it combines it behind, right? So then we have Toyota here, right? But then when we had, when we tried to add Ferrari and Toyota as individual distinct elements, we got an error, a type error, right? So append, you can only, if you want to have more than one element in your list, you have to pass it as a list, and then it automatically creates a nested list for you. So you can see what we have here, right? And how do you know that it's a nested list? Because you have like at least one list in another list, right? So that's basically what a nested list is, right? So if we want to get, for example, okay, so let me just do this. For example, I'm going to do, okay, so let's do something like this. Just a moment. Let's do delete bars. Let me count. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So let's do 6. Okay. And then I want to see my cars now. Okay, so basically, if I want to get Volvo out of this place, what will be, how will I get Volvo out of this place? Francis, you want to try? How do I get Volvo? Like, I want to get just Volvo. You want to try, Francis?
Let somebody else try. Maybe you can.
Okay, Charles, do you want to try? Or Babajide, do you want to try?
Let me try. Okay, we'll first get the Ford and Volvo, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we just put car in the square bracket 6. Abi, is it 6, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Then square bracket again.
Okay.
1.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. That's great. So you can see how easy it is, right, to get an element in a nested list. Okay. So looking at extend, right? What's the difference between append and extend, right? Just so the what's it called? You know, the limitation of append, we can, you know, get over that using the extend method, right? And the limitation of append is that we cannot have more than one element at a time, right? You can't add more than one element at a time. So I'm just going to do this again. It's going to, so we have a smaller list, and we can easily see what's going on. Okay, so I'm going to recall and just initialize again my cars to these small values, right? So here, if we have car.extend, right, you can see what's happening here, right? So it has taken under an Inoson individually, right? And it has added that to the list called cars, right? So you can see the difference between append and extend, right? So it has taken under an Inoson as two different elements, right? And it's added that, right? If we did this in using append, right, you know, we're going to automatically get like a nested list, right? So that's like the difference between append and extend, okay? All right. So this is just some examples showing us exactly what append and extend does, okay? So we're going to move on to another method called the insert method, right? So if you notice, right, both the append and the extend method adds to like the last, it adds to like the back of your list, right? So what if we want to make it in a way that we want to deliberately add it to a particular position in our list, right? We want to add it to a particular index. Want what we are adding to the list to be positioned in a particular index. How are we going to do that, right? So we can definitely use like the insert method, right? And then if we have something like cars, for example, and I want to probably insert forward, you know, here, right? I can say cars.insert, which is a method. Then I have to first off pass in what the index where I want the value of my element to be, right? So let's say I want it after, let's say at index 3, which is like after BMW, no, at index 2, right? So I can say 2, Ford, right? And then want to see cars. Like I said, if you're using something like VS Code, Visual Studio Code, you have to always remember to use the print function. But because Google Colab is very interactive, we can always just call our variable and it returns the result for us. So you can see Ford in the second index, right? So you can see how we can explicitly say we want this particular element to be in a particular position, okay? So that's it about insert method. Just if you don't understand anything, just let me know. I'm going to just check the chats as we go on.
Sorry, please, can you come again on the insert?
Okay, so what we have done so far is using how to modify our list. So we talked about the deletes. We also talked about append and extend. If you notice, right, when we're doing append, right? So for example, we sometimes go back here and just show you that real quick. Okay, so we have cars here, right? So we have cars here. This is a list, right? And then this is the elements. These are the elements of the list, okay? So when we say append something, append an element, right? It automatically joins it to the end of the former list. Does that make sense, Oladoyin? Oladayo, right?
Yes.
Okay. So this basically is just taking it behind, right? It's adding to the last. It's making the new element we are adding as the last, right? So if we want to add a new element, so I don't want my new element to occupy the last position. I want my new element to occupy a position I specify myself, right? So that's where the insert method comes in. So you can see like the first limitation of append is that it cannot take more than one element, and then extend was able to help with that, right? The limitation of both append and extend is that it's asked to the last element in the list, right? And insert can take care of that, right? So you can see the limitation of one can be achieved with another, right? So looking at the insert method. So basically, you know that the elements in our list are actually dwells in our list based on an index, right? No two elements can have the same index, right? So insert basically chooses an index, and then the element we want to put in that particular index, and then any element that stays in that index before now, it's automatically just shift it, right? So for example, we were looking at this, okay? So this is our original list, right? Cars. We have Benz, we have BMW, we have Audi, we have Bentley, right? So we have 4 elements in our list before now. But then again, okay, let me just do cars that append here. Cars dot append, and then I would do something like range, for example, right? So if I do this, for example, this here automatically adds the range to like the last part, right? It adds the range to the last element. So if I run this right now, you can see the range here, right? What if I want like the range to be somewhere here and not, you know, at the last element in my list, right? That's where the insert comes in, right? So you are inserting in a particular position, okay? So okay, so if we have something like insert 2, so this 2 means index. I want my element forward to be in this index, okay? That 2 is like the index. So if you look at this, this is 0, 1, 2. So if we run this, for example, you can see forward is now what's residing in the second index, and then it automatically shifts what is in the position before now, shift it just an index backward. Do you understand now, Oladayo?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Sorry, I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
I have let me just say challenge. What I did that extent, I put Ferrari, comma Hyundai or something on my own code. But the output I got was that is putting comma as a F, comma E, comma R, comma, and all those things.
Okay.
I don't know, maybe if you are getting it. I did extend.
I think I understand what you're trying to say. Just
I don't know what happened.
Just hold on. So I'm going to run this again, run the cell. So you did something like, let's imagine we have, I think I understand what you're trying to say. Here we have PJ, I've just said PJ, right? And then you don't have it in a list, right? If you do something like this.
That's not what I did.
What
I put it in a square bracket.
A square bracket like this?
Yeah.
Just a moment.
Yes.
Like this?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you
just quickly share your screen?
Share my screen. Okay, let me share my screen. Can you see it?
Yeah.
See what it gave me. I think my interpreter. Nice.
That's funny. Has the extent, it's giving you.
You should run it again. This, then I put then this one. It's changed. Maybe I didn't run it from beginning.
I guess so.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Okay. Yeah, so just gonna share my screen again. All right, so that's it for extend and insert. Do we have any question? We've treated nested lists. So we're just going to have like an introduction into conditional statements in Python. And basically what is a conditional statement? And Please, anything we are teaching here, you have a question? Who has a question?
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, sorry. I tried running the start method on my collab, but it's giving me a little issue. So I don't know where I'm getting it wrong. But I
Okay,
use
just share screen.
okay. Can you my screen now?
Yeah, you can see us.
Okay. So I tried the append method and I got one. So I wanted to try the start method. I don't know what I got where I got it wrong. Let's see. Let's see.
You like fufu a lot.
It's very. So let's see. I use let's see, Alpha. Okay. Now, and I run it.
Yeah, you're going to get. You're going to. Yeah, oh, definitely. When you were even typing, right, something popped up, which is like we call that IntelliSense, or in programming, right? So that is showing you, what you should do and what's not to do. Okay, but then if you look at your code, right, you're supposed to type in an index value, right, before the name you want to give it. I don't know if I make sense.
Using the insert value.
Yes, insert method takes in two arguments. One is the index method, which is where you want it to go, like where you want the the elements. Oh, sorry, so much noise. Where you want the index element to be. Okay. Yeah. So you have 5, comma. Even this will give you an error if you run it. Run it. You will see it will give you an error. So hold on before you run it. Hold on. You can read your error right now. You have like a type error, right? If you run it again, you should run it. You will see you have also a type error. So it's going to complain about the number of arguments you are having. Exactly. Just the way we, had errors when we use append and we are trying to have more than one arguments in our method, right? So insert takes just 2 arguments. The first argument is the index, and that is where you want to put in your your elements, right? The second is like an object, or let's say a string or a list value. So if you type just afang, for example, remove the fufu and type just afang. And then run it. So call food again, just return food again. No, what you're doing, you're inserting afang twice because you are rerunning that cell. So you should have just done, don't worry about it. You know why you have afang twice? Do you know why you have afang twice?
No.
Because you rerun the cell twice, like you ran the cell twice. That's why you're having afang twice. Okay. So you can see now, but if you want to add more than one element, just the way if you want to add more than one element using the append method, you can pass it as a list.
Okay.
Yeah. And when you do that,
sorry about that.
Okay.
Just like this, right?
Yeah. You might want to hold on. Oh, just use another element so that we can see what the change instead of you using afang and fufu all the time. We have rice, we have vegetables. vegetable, you have salad, you have
How about this?
remove a fan.
Okay, remove our
Yeah, so no, hold on. It will give you an error because you're not done with the lists.
okay.
Okay, please run that. Please, you might want to go on mute, please. Don't worry. Okay, so you can see what is happening, right? So you can see egusi and vegetable has been added, right? So that's basically how you do this in Python, okay? Yeah, so I'm going to talk about the screen sharing. Okay, just confirm, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so conditional statements in Python. Basically, conditional statements means that you want to do something based on a particular condition. So these concepts are basically the same across board. When I mean across board, I mean if you are working tomorrow, if you find yourself in JavaScript, tomorrow if you find yourself in Java, if you find yourself in C#, the concept remains the same. The only difference is how you write them, all right? So I write JavaScript too. So it's just the way you write them that differs, okay? So if condition, so like I said, conditional statement is basically you trying to perform something based on a requirement being met. So for example, if I say I'm a guy, for example, I'm saying if I am a guy, every one of you should send me 5,000 US dollars, right? So it basically means that, okay, everyone sends me 5,000 US dollars, right? If I am not a guy, right, it basically means you keep your money, right? So that's basically like, you know, in simple terms, right? What's conditional statement is, right? So, and how you do this. So for example, if I say, from my example, if I'm a guy and then you send me 5,000 US dollars, right? So it means that you had to check first if I, met that particular condition, right? Which is like you checking for my gender, right? And then you giving like the results by giving me 5,000 US dollars because I met that particular condition, right? That's basically how conditional statement works in any programming language, right? And how do you write conditional statements in Python, right? You write by using if, else, and elif statement. So we're going to take it one step at a time, right? So for example, so this is like the template to write conditional statements. This print here can be we can do different things here. So this is like the way you write it. So if, and then you pass in a condition. Once that condition is true, it's going to run this block of code. Okay, so this block of code can be longer than this, but like I said, we're going to start from scratch, and we're going to take it simple and build up on that. Okay, so and one thing you should also notice in Python is that you can see that this print here is not starting from where this if is starting from, right? So in Python, spaces are not taken for granted, right? In some other programming languages, you can take spaces for granted. But in Python, even space means something in Python, right? So this here is called indentation, right? And how do you indent your code? You can use either tab or you press spacebar 4 times, right? So a tab is equal to like 4 spacebar, right? So so if I do something like this, remember I said this condition runs when the condition is true. So if I say, let's say age, for example, let's say average age is equal to, let's say 28, for example. So I want to check if my, average age is 27, then print average age of the class is 27, right? So I would say if average age is equal to 27. Now, equal to 27, it means I want to check if that particular thing is equal to a condition. It is totally different from when I'm assigning a variable. Remember, when we're assigning a variable, this is how you assign a variable, using 1 equal to, right? But when you are checking for a condition, you use 2 equal to, right? So if the age is equal to 28, and then a colon. So this here is the condition we are trying to check out for, right? And then you stop this by using your colon. And then when you click enter, whenever you have a colon in Python, Python understands that, okay, you're trying to do probably write a function, you're trying to write a class, you're trying to do some very important thing in Python, and it automatically indents for you, right? So you can see after pressing enter, it indents for me. If at all it doesn't, right, I can just use my tab key, right? Or use my what? 4 space bar, right? Or 2, okay, yeah. So, so we have this, right? So I can say, okay, print the average age of the class is 28, right? So if I run this cell now, you can see, because this condition is met, you can see that it's saying the average age of the class is 24. So imagine now, let's take it a step further, right? So I want you to just, using the impute function. Remember we did something about impute? And just to brush up your mind, impute automatically returns a string, okay? So, or let's see. So if I want you to impute the age yourself, I can just say something like this. So let's even imagine this is not 28. So let's say the average age of the class is 25. If I run this, you see nothing happens, right? We are still going to go to the step whereby we would print another thing in case that condition is not met, okay? So, so if I want to say, instead of me typing, in a static way, I want you to impute the value. So I can say impute, and I can say enter the average age of the class here, right? You know what this is doing, right? So if I run this cell, for example, right, and we even pass in 28, are we going to have a result? Do you think we are going to have a result?
Yes.
Okay. So we have a result. Okay. So this is checking that. Come in just a moment. Come in. I want to check something.
We didn't have.
This. Okay, I'm coming. Checking something. String is equal to this. Can you see that we did not have a result?
Yeah.
And why is that so? Can anybody? I've actually shown the answer, but okay.
Because of the string, you've shown it.
Okay, so you can see we do not have answer, right? Because this here is checking against 28, and our average age is returning, is it 28 or string 28? So remember that this input returns a string. Remember, trying to refresh our memory. So if we want to convert this output to an integer, remember we talked about typecasting too. We can do something like this, int of this, right? So if we run this cell again, and then pass in 28, and then I say, okay, enter, you can see the average of the class is 28, right? So you can see how what we have been learning now, how it is, gradually becoming very useful, right? So that's basically how to use, the bits we have been learning, and we are trying to put things together. Before it gets complicated, if you have not watched previous videos, please watch them. If you have any issues understanding any bits, just reach out to the Slack channel, reach out on the Slack channel. You can put it definitely on the Python group, or if anybody does not answer you in the Python group, then you can send me a message. Okay, but I'm very sure we have scholars in the building. Okay, so that's like one way to check this. So imagine we do not have anybody who is 28, right? How can we now return something like the average age of the class is, for example, not what you typed in, right? So, or you've typed in the wrong average, right? So it means we are going to use another block of code. So we're going to use else statement. So for example, we're going to use the else statement, and the else statement in this case should match the if statement. So I'm going to do this, and then I'll say else. Okay, so else do print out what you have a wrong average. Try again. Okay, so if I run this now and type in a different average, maybe I type in, another number besides, this is still rolling. One disadvantage of Google Colab is it's network dependent. I guess my network is messing up right about now, but let me just try. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
I can hear you now.
Oh my goodness. I guess we lost touch of the class. Oh well, we'll start from there next time, because it's going to be difficult, merging the videos. So we'll just start from where we stopped in the next class. I hope yeah. So you have a question? You want to say something?
Yeah, I have a question. Can I share my screen?
Yeah,
I'm still taking you back to the insert. Okay. If I like this one, when I did insert 5, then the square brackets, corolla and Ford. So it's actually inserted into the fifth to the sixth, maybe the fifth index. Let me just say that. So if I want to make it insert the 2 records, and it should be like Corolla, comma, Ford. How will I do that?
Okay, so
and it should still be part of this list.
Yeah, so I totally understand like what you're trying to say. So when we get to probably loop, we can see that each of these methods has like a limitation, right? So, and that's when you now start playing with loops. You can probably do like a loop to, solve that particular error. It's not an error, like a limitation, right? So you can actually use append to add more than one element in the list at a time using loops. So when we get to that point, you will see all of this.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So thanks for coming for today's training, and definitely sorry for missing the last training. I'm sorry, I had an emergency I had to meet. Yeah, so that will be all for today's class, and I will see you on Monday. Please make sure you watch the videos we have before now. It's really simple, right? But then it gets complicated as we go on. And if you are not watching the videos, if you do not understand the concept we are teaching, at some point it's going to look really difficult. But so far so good. I don't think we've done difficult things. It's something you can understand easily. yeah, so thank you for coming for today's class, and see
Thank
you
you.
all
Thank you.
Thank
on
you.
Monday. Yeah, goodbye, everyone.
I